Captain Vex adjusted his ceremonial skull necklace and tried to look intimidating, which was difficult considering he was roughly the size and color of an angry eggplant. His three eyes narrowed as he peered through the view screen at the small research station floating peacefully in the void. "All right, you miserable space rats," he growled to his crew, though the effect was somewhat diminished by his naturally squeaky voice. "This should be easy pickings. One pathetic human outpost probably stuffed with valuable research data we can sell to the highest bidder." First mate Corva, a 7-foot-tall insectoid creature with permanently twitching antennae, clicked nervously. "Captain, are we sure about this? Humans have a reputation for being unpredictable." "Nonsense." Vex waved a stubby purple arm dismissively. "They're soft, pink, and squishy. What's the worst that could happen?" The boarding party consisted of Captain Vex, Corva, and Gleep, their perpetually anxious engineer who looked like a cross between a ferret and a satellite dish. They cut through the station's hull with all the subtlety of a meteor shower, expecting to find cowering researchers begging for mercy. Instead, they found Dr. Marcus Webb hunched over a microscope, completely ignoring the sparks and alarms going off around him. He was a lanky human in his 30s, with the kind of stubble that suggested he'd forgotten to shave for the past week, and coffee stains on his lab coat that could probably be carbon dated. "Excuse me," Marcus said without looking up, "but you're letting all the atmosphere out. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to repressurize a lab?" The pirate stood there for a moment, weapons raised, trying to process this reaction. Captain Vex cleared his throat menacingly. "We are the feared crew of the Screaming Void. Surrender your research and prepare to be taken hostage." Marcus finally looked up, blinked once, and glanced at his watch. "Oh, are you the pirates? You're about 3 hours early. I haven't finished cataloging the mineral samples yet." He paused, studying Vex with scientific interest. "Also, your atmospheric suits are completely wrong for this environment. Those seals are going to fail in about 20 minutes. "What happened?" Gleep squeaked, immediately checking his suit's readings. "Ignore him," Vex snapped. "Humans lie constantly." "No, seriously," Marcus continued, now fully engaged in problem-solving mode. "Look at that pressure differential reading. And is that duct tape holding your helmet together? That's not even vacuum-rated duct tape. That's the cheap stuff from the ship supply catalog." Corva's antennae twitched faster. "How do you know about ship supply catalogs?" "I've been stuck on this research station for 6 months with nothing but outdated equipment catalogs for entertainment. Trust me, I know every overpriced tool and substandard component in the known galaxy." Marcus stood up and started walking toward them, which should have been threatening, except he was clearly more interested in their gear than their weapons. "Speaking of substandard, that plasma rifle you're holding is at least 15 years old. The power coupling probably misfires every 3rd shot." As if on cue, Corva's weapon made a sad whimpering sound and shut down. "There it goes," Marcus nodded approvingly. "You really should upgrade to the Mark 7 series. Better battery life, more reliable plasma containment, and the ergonomics are vastly improved." Captain Vex was starting to get a headache. This was not how hostage situations were supposed to go. Just grab him and let's get back to the ship." "Grab me?" Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would you want to do that? I'm just a xenobiologist, unless—" His eyes lit up with sudden understanding. "Oh, you must be here about the archaeological specimens. I've been trying to get someone out here to properly catalog them for months. The automated systems keep classifying everything as unknown mineral formations, which is completely useless for research purposes." Gleep, who had been nervously checking his suit seals, looked up hopefully. "You know about archaeological specimens?" "Know about them. I've got 17 different artifact categories that your standard analysis protocols can't even begin to properly identify. Half of them are probably worth more than your ship." And that, thought Captain Vex, as his crew began asking increasingly interested questions about proper specimen handling procedures, was exactly how he ended up accidentally kidnapping the galaxy's most enthusiastic and thoroughly caffeinated xenobiologist, who was now critiquing their extraction technique. Back aboard the Screaming Void, Captain Vex stared at the holding cell where Marcus was supposed to be imprisoned. The problem was that Marcus wasn't actually in the cell. He was standing outside it, having apparently picked the lock and was now rearranging the weapons locker across the corridor. "What," Vex said slowly, "are you doing?" "Oh, hi, Captain," Marcus replied cheerfully, not looking up from where he was sorting plasma cartridges by energy output. "I organized your ammunition storage. You had explosive rounds mixed in with standard charges, which is a fantastic way to accidentally vaporize your own ship. Also, whoever was storing these kept the thermal detonators next to the power cells. That's literally the first thing they tell you not to do in basic safety protocols. Bullet poked his head around the corner, saw Marcus handling their weapons, and, instead of panicking, asked, "Did you figure out why the hyperdrive keeps making that grinding noise?" "Oh, that's easy," Marcus said, finally looking up. "Your flux capacitor is misaligned by about 3 degrees. It's been slowly wearing down your drive coupling for months. If you don't fix it soon, you're going to have a catastrophic failure that'll strand you in whatever system you're currently in." Captain Vex felt his left eye begin to twitch. "You've been aboard my ship for exactly 2 hours. How could you possibly know what's wrong with our hyperdrive?" Marcus shrugged. "I walked past the engine room. It's making the exact same sound as the coffee machine back at the research station right before it exploded. Basic mechanical sympathy." He paused thoughtfully. "Speaking of which, do you have any coffee? Because I've been awake for about 36 hours running spectral analyses and I'm starting to crash." "We don't drink coffee," Corva interjected, her antennae twitching with what Vex was beginning to recognize as stress. "We drink Vorthak blood wine." "That explains so much about your decision-making process," Marcus nodded sagely. "Alcohol is a depressant. It impairs cognitive function, reaction time, and strategic thinking. No wonder you guys have been raiding defenseless cargo ships instead of going after actual valuable targets." There was a long, uncomfortable silence. "What do you mean, defenseless cargo ships?" Vex asked, though he was pretty sure he didn't want to know the answer. Marcus pulled out a tablet that definitely hadn't belonged to him 2 hours ago, and started scrolling through what appeared to be shipping manifests. "Well, according to your own logs, your last 15 raids were against automated freight haulers, agricultural supply vessels, and one passenger liner that was carrying a geriatric tour group to see the Andromeda Nebula." "Those were strategic targets," Vex protested. "Strategic targets," Marcus repeated flatly. "You robbed a ship full of senior citizens on vacation." Cleet made a small whimpering sound. They had really good stories about the old days. "And you," Marcus continued, turning to Corva, "according to these psychological profiles I found in your personal files, you have a degree in xenobiology from the Galactic University. You could be doing legitimate research instead of stealing overpriced tourist trinkets and expired medical supplies." Cora's antennae drooped. "The job market is very competitive. So is piracy, apparently, and you're not very good at it." Marcus set down the tablet and looked around at the 3 aliens staring at him with varying expressions of confusion and existential dread. "Look, I'm not judging. Well, okay, I am judging a little. But here's the thing. Your ship's cargo hold is full of actual archaeological treasures that you've been using as furniture and decorative items. You're literally sitting on enough legitimate scientific discoveries to fund a proper research expedition." Captain Vex blinked all 3 eyes in rapid succession. "What archaeological treasures?" "The ones you've been using as paperweights and doorstops? That crystal formation you're using to prop open the airlock? It's a pre-Cambrian stellar cartography device, probably worth more than most planets." The pirates looked at each other, then back at Marcus, who had somehow managed to make them feel like failures at their own chosen profession in under 3 hours. "So," Gleep asked hopefully, "could you show us how to fix the hyperdrive?" 24 hours later, Captain Vex stood in what used to be his treasure room and tried very hard not to have a complete mental breakdown. The chaotic pile of loot that had once filled the space was gone, replaced by neat rows of specimen containers, each labeled with proper taxonomic classifications and estimated cultural significance. "This," Marcus announced, gesturing proudly at a crystalline artifact that was now sitting in a proper containment field instead of being used as a hat rack, "is a Zentari meditation crystal. It's about 12,000 years old, and was probably used in religious ceremonies by a civilization that vanished before your species even discovered fire." "We were using it to hang our coats," Gleet whispered in horror. "Yes, and the residual psychic energy buildup was probably why everyone's been having those weird dreams about purple mathematics." Marcus moved to the next display case. "And this little beauty you were using as a beer bottle opener? It's actually a quantum resonance tuning fork. Pre-warp civilizations used these to calibrate their early FTL experiments." Corva stared at the device that had opened approximately 3,000 bottles of Vorthak blood wine. "How much is it worth?" "Monetarily, probably enough to buy a small moon. Scientifically, it's priceless. The quantum resonance patterns could revolutionize our understanding of early FTL development." Marcus paused, then added helpfully, "Also, using it as a bottle opener was slowly destabilizing its quantum matrix. In about 6 months, it would have exploded and taken half your ship with it. Captain Vex sat down heavily on what he'd thought was a decorative stool, but was apparently a sacred meditation seat of the lost Arcturidan monks. He was beginning to understand why Corva's antennae had developed a permanent twitch. "How," he asked wearily, "did we not know any of this?" Marcus looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Well, you never scanned anything. Your computer system is still running archaeological analysis software from about 40 years ago. It's like trying to perform brain surgery with a butter knife." He gestured around the transformed room. "I updated your databases, recalibrated your sensors, and cross-referenced everything with the current xenoarchaeological literature. Basic scientific methodology." "Basic," Corval repeated faintly. "Oh, and speaking of your computer system, I fixed that too. Your AI was stuck in a recursive loop trying to calculate hyperspace coordinates using outdated stellar cartography data. No wonder you kept ending up 3 systems away from your intended targets." That explained a lot, actually. Vex had always assumed they were just really bad at navigation. "The thing is," Marcus continued, warming to his subject, "you guys have been accidentally conducting legitimate archaeological expeditions this whole time. You just didn't realize it, because you weren't documenting anything properly." He pulled up a holographic display showing their previous raid locations. "Look at this pattern. You've been hitting sites that correlate almost perfectly with known ancient trade routes. Your piracy instincts were actually leading you to archaeologically significant locations." Gleep perked up. "Really?" "Really. That abandoned space station you raided last month. It wasn't abandoned. It was a perfectly preserved Valdorian research outpost. The worthless junk you took was actually a complete collection of their scientific instruments." Marcus grinned. "Congratulations. You accidentally made one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the century." The 3 pirates stared at him in stunned silence. "So what you're saying," Captain Vex said slowly, "is that we're not actually terrible pirates." "Oh, no. You're absolutely terrible pirates," Marcus said cheerfully. "But you're accidentally brilliant archaeologists. There's a difference." At that moment, the ship's proximity alarms began blaring. Corva checked the sensors and announced, "Captain, there's a derelict vessel ahead. Looks like it's been drifting for centuries." The old Captain Vex would have ordered an immediate boarding action to strip anything valuable. The new, slightly more educated Captain Vex found himself asking, "Marcus, what's the proper protocol for investigating a potential archaeological site?" Marcus's eyes lit up like someone had just offered him unlimited research funding and really good coffee. 3 weeks later, Captain Vex was having what could generously be called an identity crisis, and what Marcus would probably classify as a complete psychological restructuring event with accompanying existential vertigo. The crisis had started when they'd received their first appointment request. "Captain," Corva announced, her antennae now in a state of permanent bewildered twitch, "we have 17 different research institutions asking to schedule visits to observe our revolutionary archaeological methodology." Beck stared at the communication console as if it had personally betrayed him. "They want to visit us? The screaming void? The terror of the Outer Rim?" "Well," Gleep said helpfully, "technically, we're not the terror of anything anymore. The Galactic News Network is calling us the most unexpectedly educational experience in known space." He paused. "Also, Marcus published our findings from the Valdorian outpost, and apparently we're now cited in peer-reviewed journals." Captain Vex made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Peer-reviewed journals." "Oh, it gets better," Marcus called from across the bridge, where he was calibrating some new scanning equipment that had mysteriously appeared overnight. 3 different universities want to offer the crew honorary degrees, and the Galactic Archaeological Society wants to give you their Distinguished Service Award." "I don't want a Distinguished Service Award," Vex moaned. "I want to be feared across the galaxy." "Well, you are," Marcus said reasonably. "Half the graduate students in the xenoarchaeology department are terrified they'll never make discoveries as significant as yours." This wasn't helping Vex's mental state. Neither was the fact that their most recent raid had turned into a guided educational tour when they'd discovered that the abandoned cargo vessel was actually carrying passengers, who'd specifically requested to meet the famous research crew of the productive academic endeavor. "We changed the ship's name," Vex said weakly. "When did we change the ship's name?" "Last Tuesday," Gleep replied. "Marcus said Screaming Void was psychologically counterproductive to establishing trust with research subjects. The new name tested much better with focus groups." "What focus groups?" "The ones Marcus organized with our visitors. They filled out questionnaires about their experience and everything. We got a 97% satisfaction rating." Captain Vex put his head in his hands. All three of them. That's when the proximity alarms went off again, but this time they sounded almost apologetic. Corva checked the sensors and her expression shifted to something between amusement and terror. "Captain, it's the Bloodfang Marauders. They're requesting permission to come aboard?" The Bloodfang Marauders were exactly the kind of pirates the Screaming Void used to be. Ruthless, violent, and spectacularly unsuccessful at anything requiring actual intelligence. Their leader, Captain Skag, was a 10-foot-tall reptilian nightmare, with more scars than sense, and a personal philosophy that could be summarized as, shoot first, shoot second, ask questions while continuing to shoot. When Skag materialized on their bridge via transport beam, he was clearly expecting to find the same pathetic crew he'd mocked at the last Pirate Council meeting. Instead, he found Marcus explaining stellar formation theory to an attentive audience of former pirates who were taking notes. "What," Skag snarled, "is this?" "Oh, hi there," Marcus said, looking up from his holographic star chart. "Are you here for the lecture series? We're just covering the basics of stellar cartography and its applications in archaeological site prediction. Very fascinating stuff." Skag's yellow eyes narrowed as he took in the transformed bridge. Gone were the skulls, the intimidating weapon displays, and the general atmosphere of barely controlled violence. In their place were comfortable seating areas, several tea services, and what appeared to be a small library. "Vex," Skag growled, "what have you done to your ship?" Captain Vex, who had been hoping this moment would never come, straightened up and tried to summon some of his old bluster. "We've diversified our operational parameters." "You've gone soft," Skag spat. "The entire Outer Rim is laughing at you. They're calling you the educational experience. Some pirates are even sending their cubs here for field trips." "Now that's not entirely accurate," Marcus interjected helpfully. "The educational programs are strictly for adults. We maintain very clear age requirements for all archaeological expeditions." Skag turned to stare at Marcus with the expression of someone who'd just discovered that his intimidating roar had been answered by a polite request to keep the noise down. "And you are?" "Dr. Marcus Webb, Senior Xenoarchaeologist and Director of Applied Research Methodologies." Marcus extended his hand in greeting. "I don't believe we've been introduced. Would you like some coffee? I finally got a decent machine installed." What happened next would later be recorded in pirate legend as the day Captain Skag, terror of 3-star systems, was comprehensively educated on the socioeconomic factors that drive individuals toward careers in space piracy. It started when Marcus, with characteristic human curiosity, began asking questions about Skag's background. Where had he grown up? What were the economic conditions on his home planet? Had he considered legitimate career alternatives? Skag, who had never been asked about his feelings by anyone, much less a small human with enthusiastic hand gestures, found himself explaining the systematic unemployment that had plagued his home system after the mining industry collapsed. "Fascinating," Marcus nodded, making notes on his ever-present tablet. "So piracy represented not just economic opportunity, but also a form of social identity construction in response to systemic marginalization. Have you considered that your aggressive behavioral patterns might be compensatory mechanisms for feelings of powerlessness within the larger galactic economic structure?" 20 minutes later, Captain Skag was crying into his coffee while Marcus offered him tissues and suggested some excellent papers on post-colonial economic theory. 30 minutes after that, Skag was filling out an application for the Galactic Community College's distance learning program in business administration. Captain Vex watched this transformation with the horrified fascination of someone witnessing the complete breakdown of everything he'd thought he understood about the universe. "Marcus," he said quietly, "what have you done to us?" Marcus looked up from where he was helping Skag work through his feelings about his relationship with his father and smiled that terrifyingly innocent smile. "I've helped you discover your true potential. Isn't that what education is supposed to do?" The emergency session of the Galactic Pirate Council was held on Torgan Prime, in a seedy cantina that smelled of disappointment and poorly distilled alcohol. The assembled captains represented the worst of the worst. Cutthroats, marauders, and general menaces to civilized society who had built their reputations on being thoroughly, consistently terrible people. And they were all very, very concerned about the Screaming Void situation. "This," declared High Admiral Krex, a scarred veteran of 1,000 raids who wore the finger bones of his enemies as a beard ornament, "has gone too far. Vex and his crew have become a disgrace to everything we stand for." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled pirates. Someone in the back shouted, "They made Skag cry!" "It was very cathartic for him," came a familiar voice from the cantina entrance. He's been carrying a lot of unresolved trauma from his childhood. Every pirate in the room turned to see Marcus walking calmly through the door, followed by Captain Vex, Corva, and Gleep. The former crew of the Screaming Void looked deeply uncomfortable to be back in their old criminal hangout, like reformed alcoholics who'd accidentally wandered into a brewery. "Dr. Webb," High Admiral Krex snarled, "you are not welcome here." "Oh, I'm not Dr. Webb today," Marcus said cheerfully, setting up what appeared to be a portable presentation screen. "Today I'm defending my colleague's dissertation on paradigmatic shifts in resource acquisition methodologies among non-state actors in the Outer Rim. It's really quite groundbreaking research." The pirates stared at him blankly. He means he's here to defend our right to stop being pirates," Glebe translated helpfully. This caused an immediate uproar. Pirates began shouting threats, waving weapons, and generally behaving like the violent criminals they were. Marcus waited patiently for the noise to die down, then activated his presentation. "Gentlemen, ladies, and non-binary entities of various species," he began, "I'd like to present some data that I think you'll find very interesting." The first slide showed a graph labeled Pirate Crew Mortality Rates by Operational Category. As you can see, traditional piracy has a 93% casualty rate over a 5-year period. This is primarily due to poor strategic planning, inadequate safety protocols, and what social scientists call toxic workplace culture. Several pirates shifted uncomfortably. Admiral Krex had lost 4 crews in the past decade. The second slide showed another graph. By contrast, legitimate archaeological expeditions have a mortality rate of only 12%, and most of those deaths are due to ancient booby traps, which are at least interesting ways to die. "Get to the point, human," Krex growled. "The point," Marcus said, advancing to his third slide, "is that Captain Vex and his crew have stumbled upon a revolutionary new economic model. Instead of stealing things and hoping they're valuable, they're identifying genuinely valuable things and acquiring them through legitimate channels. Their profit margins have increased by 400%. This got everyone's attention. Pirates might be violent criminals, but they were also, fundamentally, entrepreneurs with poor impulse control. 400%, whispered Captain Ravage, a notorious raider who'd been struggling to make ends meet. 437% actually, Marcus confirmed. And that's just in the past month. The Valdorian research data alone sold for enough to buy 3 new ships. "You sold research data." Admiral Krex looked personally offended. "We licensed research data," Corva corrected, "at a premium rate, to 17 different institutions, with royalty agreements." Marcus nodded approvingly. Corva has really taken to intellectual property law. She's quite brilliant at contract negotiation. The cantina had gone very quiet. Marcus could practically see the gears turning in dozens of criminal minds as they tried to process the concept of legal, sustainable profit. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I've prepared individual business plans for each of your crews based on psychological profiles and operational histories." He gestured, and his tablet began projecting personalized holographic displays above each pirate captain's head. "Captain Ravage, your crew's tendency toward violence and your background in demolitions makes you ideal candidates for hazardous archaeological site clearance. There's a 6-month waiting list for qualified teams." Captain Ravage stared at his projected business plan, which included projected earnings, safety protocols, and a comprehensive benefits package. "I could blow things up legally." "Controlled demolitions are a crucial part of archaeological work," Marcus confirmed. "Ancient civilizations were very fond of elaborate security systems." He turned to another captain. "Captain Vortex, your expertise in zero-gravity maneuvering and your crew's mechanical aptitude would be perfect for deep space artifact recovery. The insurance companies are desperate for reliable contractors." One by one, Marcus worked through the room, presenting each crew with a legitimate career path that played to their existing skills, while offering better pay, lower mortality rates, and actual health benefits. But Admiral Krex protested weakly. "We're pirates. We're supposed to be feared across the galaxy." "And you will be," Marcus assured him. "Do you know what strikes fear into the hearts of corrupt bureaucrats and illegal smuggling operations? Highly competent, well-funded, legitimate investigators with legal authority and proper documentation." He gestured to Captain Vex, who stepped forward looking like a man who'd found his calling but was still slightly confused about how it had happened. "My crew has been contacted by 3 different planetary governments to investigate smuggling operations," Vex announced. Apparently, our reputation for finding things that other people want to keep hidden has made us very popular with law enforcement agencies. You're working for the law now? Someone gasped. We're working for ourselves, Gleep said proudly. But the law pays really well, and they provide excellent research equipment. Marcus advanced to his final slide. A group photo of the former Screaming Void crew receiving their honorary degrees from the Galactic University. They were all smiling. Even Captain Vex looked happy. Gentlemen, Marcus said, I'm not here to destroy your way of life. I'm here to upgrade it. The question is, do you want to keep struggling as third-rate criminals, or do you want to become first-rate professionals? The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Captain Ravage raised his hand. About those controlled demolitions, he said hesitantly. Would I still get to use explosives? Marcus grinned. Captain, you'll get to use explosives that are specifically designed for archaeological work. They're much more sophisticated than anything you've ever used before. I'm interested. Me too, said another voice. And me. Within an hour, the emergency session of the Galactic Pirate Council had turned into an impromptu career counseling workshop, with Marcus helping former pirates fill out applications for various certification programs while they argued about who got to join which research team. Admiral Krex sat alone at the bar, staring into his drink and wondering when exactly his life had taken such a strange turn. Don't worry, Marcus said, appearing beside him with a fresh application form. I've got the perfect opportunity for someone with your leadership experience and extensive knowledge of criminal networks. Krex looked up warily. What? Consulting work with the Galactic Security Council. They need someone who really understands how criminal organizations operate. Marcus smiled that innocent, terrifying smile. The pay is excellent, and you get to travel all over the galaxy. Fighting crime? Think of it as competitive intelligence gathering with a more socially beneficial outcome. Admiral Krex stared at the application form, then at the room full of former pirates enthusiastically planning their new careers, then back at Marcus. Human, he said finally, you are absolutely terrifying. Thank you, Marcus replied cheerfully. I get that a lot. 6 months later, the ship formerly known as the Screaming Void drifted peacefully through the Kepler Nebula, its hull now adorned with the official seal of the Galactic Archaeological Survey and a small plaque that read, Productive Academic Endeavor, Making Discoveries Not Enemies, since 2387. Captain Vex, now officially Research Director Vex, stood on the bridge reviewing their latest mission parameters. The transformation was remarkable. Where once there had been weapon arrays, sophisticated scanning equipment now mapped ancient stellar phenomena. The old skull and crossbones flags had been replaced with colorful banners representing the 17 different universities that sponsored their expeditions. Status report, Vex called, though his tone lacked the menacing growl he'd once cultivated. It was hard to sound threatening when you were asking about spectral analysis readings. All systems optimal, Research Director, Gleep responded from his station. The nervous engineer had blossomed into a confident technical specialist, his console now displaying data streams that would have made his pirate ancestors weep with boredom. The new quantum resonance scanners are picking up some fascinating anomalies in Sector 7. Fascinating anomalies had become their specialty. In the past 6 months, the crew of the Productive Academic Endeavor had discovered 3 previously unknown ancient civilizations, solved the mystery of the vanishing fleet of Altair Prime, and accidentally prevented 2 interstellar wars by providing archaeological evidence that certain disputed territories had actually belonged to entirely different species who'd gone extinct millennia ago. Dr. Webb, Vex continued, what's your assessment? Marcus looked up from his workstation, where he was simultaneously running genetic analyses on some crystalline samples, peer-reviewing a paper on temporal archaeology, and teaching an online seminar to graduate students from 43 different planets. His coffee consumption had reached levels that would have been concerning if anyone hadn't already accepted that Marcus operated on a completely different metabolic system than the rest of known biology. The quantum signatures suggest we're looking at precursor technology, Marcus announced, causing an immediate stir of excitement throughout the bridge. The precursors were the legendary first spacefaring civilization, thought to be mythical, until the Productive Academic Endeavor had started finding their artifacts with alarming regularity. Precursor tech? Corva's antennae perked up with what had become her signature expression of scientific enthusiasm. The former first mate had completed her doctorate in xenobiology through distance learning, and was now considered one of the galaxy's leading experts on extinct civilizations. That would make this our 4th major discovery this quarter. 5th, Marcus corrected absently. Don't forget the temporal displacement device we found last week. We agreed not to count that one until the temporal paradox paperwork clears the ethics committee, Corva reminded him. This was their life now. Casual conversations about universe-altering discoveries, ethics committees, and peer review processes. It was, Vex had to admit, considerably more intellectually stimulating than robbing tourist ships. The bridge doors opened to admit Admiral Krex, though he now preferred his official title of Senior Consultant for Criminal Network Analysis with the Galactic Security Council. His transformation had been perhaps the most dramatic of all the former pirates. He'd traded his bone jewelry for a respectable uniform, and his death threats for strongly worded interdepartmental memos. Vex, Krex announced, I've got news from the Security Council. They're officially classifying your crew as a strategic galactic asset. What does that mean, exactly? Vex asked, though he suspected he already knew. It means, Krex continued with obvious pride, that you're now considered so valuable to galactic scientific progress that you get your own military escort, unlimited research funding, and diplomatic immunity in 47 star systems. Marcus looked up from his work with mild interest. Does the diplomatic immunity cover parking violations? Because I may have accidentally left our shuttle in a no-landing zone on Rigel 7th last month. It covers everything, Krex assured him. The Council has decided that interfering with your research could be considered a crime against galactic civilization. This pronouncement was met with the kind of stunned silence that had become common whenever the crew was reminded of just how far they'd come from their origins as incompetent space criminals. Speaking of origins, Marcus said, pulling up a holographic display. I've been tracking the career progress of our former pirate colleagues. The results are quite encouraging. The display showed a galaxy-wide map dotted with friendly green indicators. Each dot represented a former pirate crew that had transitioned to legitimate work. Captain Ravish's demolition team has become the most sought-after archaeological clearance specialists in 3 sectors, Marcus reported. Captain Vortex is now running deep space recovery operations for the Insurance Consortium. Captain Nightfall has started a very successful consulting firm specializing in security assessments for archaeological sites. And Captain Skag? Gleep asked. Graduated summa cum laude from the Galactic Community College and is now pursuing his master's degree in social work. He's written a very moving thesis on rehabilitation programs for former criminals. Bex shook his head in amazement. How did this happen, Marcus? How did you turn an entire criminal organization into productive members of society? Marcus paused in his work and looked around at the transformed bridge, at his friends and colleagues who'd once been bumbling space pirates, at the peaceful stars visible through their reinforced research viewports. I didn't turn you into anything, he said finally. I just gave you better options and showed you that intelligence is more profitable than violence. Humans have a saying, give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. I just taught you all how to fish in a very large pond with much better fish. And the fact that we've accidentally become the most feared investigative team in the galaxy? Corva asked with amusement. Well, Marcus grinned, that's just a bonus. Nothing strikes fear into the hearts of corrupt officials like competent people with proper documentation and unlimited research funding. At that moment, their communications array chimed with an incoming priority message. The holographic display revealed the seal of the Galactic President herself. Research Director Vex, the President's image announced. The Galactic Council has a situation that requires your team's unique expertise. We have reports of an ancient alien structure that's appeared near the Crab Nebula. It's emitting signals we can't decode, and it's the size of a small moon. The crew of the productive academic endeavor exchanged glances. 6 months ago, a mysterious alien megastructure would have sent them running in the opposite direction. Now, it just sounded like Tuesday. Tell them we'll take the case, Vex replied with the confidence of someone who'd discovered that knowledge really was power. But we'll need full access to the Galactic Library databases and authorization to bring along our graduate student research assistants. Anything you need, the President assured him. The fate of galactic civilization may depend on understanding what that structure is. After the transmission ended, the bridge fell quiet except for the gentle hum of advanced scientific equipment and the sound of Marcus typing up preliminary research protocols. You know, Gleep said thoughtfully, I never thought I'd say this, but I actually prefer our new job. Better hours, better pay, better coffee, Corval agreed. And, Vex added, looking out at the stars with something that might have been wonder, we're actually making the galaxy a better place, instead of just making it more dangerous. Marcus looked up from his workstation, where he was already pulling up everything known about megastructures and ancient alien technology. His eyes had that familiar gleam that meant he'd found a problem worth solving. Besides, he said, we're still pirates in a way. We're just stealing knowledge instead of cargo, and we're stealing it from the universe itself. He paused, then added with that innocent smile that had transformed a ship full of criminals into the galaxy's most successful research team. And the universe has much better treasure than anything we ever found in those cargo holds. The productive academic endeavor turned toward the Crab Nebula, its sensors already scanning for signs of the impossible. Behind them, they left a galaxy that was slightly more organized, considerably better educated, and measurably safer than it had been before a group of incompetent pirates had accidentally kidnapped the right human. After all, as Marcus had learned long ago during his graduate studies, the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't a weapon or a warship, or even a black hole. It was a curious human with nothing to lose and unlimited access to a really good library. And maybe some decent coffee.